I stood at the podium in my conference room, looking out at the news cameras, the reporter from Channel 7, and my son Terrence's face as it changed from confident to confused to absolutely horrified. He was wearing a brand new Navy suit, probably cost him $2,000 he didn't have, and his wife Shanice stood beside him in a cream dress that still had the tag tucked under the collar. I could see it from where I stood. "And so," I said, my voice steady as I held the hand of Mrs. Geneva Washington, director of the Bright Futures Children's Foundation. "It is my absolute honor to announce that I am donating the entirety of Morrison Beauty Supply Company to this wonderful organization. All assets, all locations, all proceeds, everything will now go toward providing educational opportunities and resources for underprivileged children in our community." The cameras flashed. Mrs. Washington squeezed my hand and smiled with tears in her eyes. The small crowd of reporters and foundation board members applauded. "And Terrence?" My 42-year-old son stood there with his mouth open like a fish gasping for air. "What?" he finally managed to say. "What did you just say?" I looked at him calmly. "I said I'm donating the company, Terrence. Effective immediately. But you said, Monday morning you said there'd be an announcement. I said to clear your schedule for an announcement. This is the announcement." His wife grabbed his arm. "Terry, what is she talking about? I thought you said you were taking over the company. We already put a deposit on that house in Cascade Heights." Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Let me tell you how we got here. Let me tell you about the 43 years I spent building Morrison Beauty Supply from nothing, and the son who thought he could just take it all away with a few cruel words. My name is Beatrice Morrison, and I'm 71 years old. I started my first beauty supply store in 1982 with money I saved from working 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, doing hair in my kitchen during the day, and working weekend shifts at my cousin's restaurant. My husband Claude had just passed from a heart attack, leaving me with a 7-year-old son and exactly $800 in the bank. I'll never forget walking into that empty storefront on Simpson Road. The windows were dirty, the floors were cracked, and there was a leak in the ceiling that dripped right onto the counter where I planned to put my register. But it was mine. I signed that lease with a shaking hand and a prayer on my lips. Those first years were hard. I mean, hard. I'd open the shop at 6 in the morning and close at 9 at night. I learned how to fix the plumbing myself, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to do my own bookkeeping. Terrence would do his homework in the back room after school, and on weekends he'd help me stock shelves. He was a good boy back then. Smart, too. Always brought home good grades, stayed out of trouble. I worked myself half to death so he could go to Morehouse College. I was so proud when he graduated. My baby boy with a business degree. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Maybe it was when he married Shanice, a woman who grew up with money and couldn't understand why her husband's mama didn't just retire and hand everything over. Maybe it was when his friends started getting fancy jobs and he felt like working in the family business was beneath him. Or maybe it was just that he forgot what it meant to struggle, to build something from nothing. By the time I was 65, Morrison Beauty Supply had grown to 12 locations across Atlanta. We employed 93 people. We sponsored youth programs, gave scholarships, donated to churches. The business was worth close to $5 million. And I still showed up every single day to make sure everything ran right. Terrence worked for me, technically. I gave him the title of operations manager and paid him a salary of $85,000 a year. But the truth? He showed up maybe 3 days a week, always left early, and spent most of his time complaining about how I ran things. "Mama, you need to modernize," he'd say. "Get with the times. Nobody does business like this anymore." Never mind that doing business like this had built him the comfortable life he enjoyed. Never mind that my old-fashioned ways kept 93 families fed. Then came last Monday, the day everything changed. I was in my office at the main location on North Avenue, going over inventory reports. My reading glasses were sliding down my nose, and I had a cup of coffee going cold on my desk. I heard the door slam open so hard it hit the wall. Terrence stormed in without knocking. His face was red, and he had that look, the one he got when Shanice had been in his ear about something. "We need to talk," he said. I set down my papers. "Good morning to you too, baby. You want some coffee?" "I don't want coffee, Mama. I want to talk about this company." "What about it?" He started pacing back and forth in front of my desk, and I knew something bad was coming. "Look, I've been patient, real patient, but it's time." "Time for what?" "Time for you to retire." I blinked at him. "Excuse me?" "You're 71 years old, Mama. You should be at home, relaxing, enjoying your golden years, not working yourself to death in these stores." "I like working. And last time I checked, these stores still have my name on them." His jaw tightened. "That's exactly the problem. Everything is always about you. Your stores, your rules, your way of doing things. When do I get a chance?" "A chance to what, Terrence? You barely show up as it is." "Because you won't let me do anything. Every decision has to go through you. Every change I suggest, you shut down. I have ideas, Mama. Good ideas. But you treat me like I'm still a child." I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. We'd had this conversation before. Many times. "Terrence, baby, I built this company from the ground up. Every decision I make comes from 43 years of experience. If I shoot down your ideas, it's because you can't let go." He slammed his hand on my desk, making the coffee cup rattle. "You can't accept that I'm a grown man with a degree and a vision for this company. You'd rather work yourself to death than trust your own son." "That's not fair." "What's not fair is me waiting for my inheritance while you refuse to pass the torch. I'm tired of waiting, Mama. I'm tired of being treated like an employee instead of your son. I'm tired of Shanice's family asking when I'm finally going to step up and run things." He leaned over my desk, and his next words came out cold and hard. "I'm tired of you, Mama." Those words hit me like a slap. I sat there staring at my son, and I barely recognized him. "You're tired of me," I repeated quietly. "Yes, I'm tired. Tired of the excuses, tired of the control, tired of everything. Just retire. Give me the company. Let me take over." "It's time." The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. I looked at my son, my baby boy, who I'd raised by myself, who I'd sacrificed everything for, and I saw a stranger. But I didn't let him see me hurt. I'd learned a long time ago not to show weakness. "All right," I said. He blinked. "What?" "All right. If that's what you want, Terrence. If you're that tired of your old mama, then—" "All right." His expression changed. He stood up straighter, surprised that I'd given in so easy. "You mean it?" "Clear your schedule for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I'll make an announcement." A slow smile spread across his face. "Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'll be there." He actually had the nerve to look relieved. "You're doing the right thing, Mama. You'll see. I'm going to take this company to the next level." He left my office whistling. I sat there for a long time after he was gone, staring at the family photo on my desk. It was from 10 years ago at my 61st birthday party. Terrence had his arm around me, both of us smiling. My grandbabies, Amara and Quincy, were sitting in front of us, grinning with missing teeth. Where did I go wrong? I wondered. When did my son become someone who could look his mother in the eye and say he was tired of her? I picked up my phone and made a call. "Pastor Green, it's Beatrice Morrison. I need some advice, and I need it fast." That week was the longest of my life. I met with my lawyer, Harold Chen. Wait, no, can't use Chen. Let me call him Harold Griffith. I met with my lawyer, Harold Griffith, on Tuesday. I called Geneva, Washington from the Bright Futures Children's Foundation on Wednesday. I contacted my accountant, my board members, and my closest friend from church, Wanda. "Girl, are you sure about this?" Wanda asked me over coffee Thursday morning at Pascal's. "That's your baby boy." "That's not my baby boy anymore," I said quietly. "My baby boy would never tell me he's tired of me. My baby boy would never storm into my office and demand what I built with my own 2 hands. But to give away the whole company—" "It's not giving it away, Wanda. It's making sure it goes to people who will appreciate it. Children who need help, who need opportunities. That's better than watching my son run it into the ground while his wife spends the profits on designer bags." Wanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're a stronger woman than me, Bea." Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Monday morning, about the look that was going to be on Terrence's face. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt sad. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time around my son. I felt free. Monday morning, I got to the office at 7 a.m. The camera crew arrived at 8. Geneva Washington came at 8:30 with her board members. Harold Griffith stood in the back with all the paperwork ready. Wanda sat in the front row, giving me encouraging nods. At 8:55, Terrence walked in with Shanice on his arm. He was wearing that expensive new suit, and she was dressed like she was going to a garden party. They both had these big smiles on their faces. Terrence actually winked at me. Winked. Like we were in on some secret together. If only he knew. At exactly 9 a.m., I stepped up to the podium, looked out at the cameras and the small crowd, took a deep breath, and began to speak. And now, here we were. Terrence was still standing there in shock, and Shanice was starting to realize that the house they'd put a deposit on was about to disappear. "Mama," Terrence said, his voice cracking. "Mama, what did you do?" I stepped down from the podium and walked over to him. For a moment, we just looked at each other. "I did what you asked me to do, son. I retired. I let go of the company." I paused. "You just didn't ask me who I was giving it to." But it's mine. I'm your son. You can't just..." "Can't just what? Can't just do what I want with something I built? Something I own?" I shook my head. "You wanted me out of your way, Terrence. Well, now I am. The company belongs to the Bright Futures Foundation now. They'll run it, and all the profits will go to helping children in need. Children who actually appreciate opportunities when they're given to them." Shanice's voice went high and sharp. "This is illegal. We'll sue. You can't just steal his inheritance." Harold Griffith stepped forward. "Mrs. Morrison was under no legal obligation to leave the company to anyone. All paperwork has been filed correctly and legally. The company is now the property of the Bright Futures Children's Foundation." "Call your own lawyer if you want," I said calmly. "You'll hear the same thing." Terrence's face went from red to pale. "Mama, please. Please, you can't do this. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I said those things. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I interrupted. "And that's okay, baby. You're tired of me. Well, now you don't have to worry about me anymore. You don't have to wait for your inheritance. You don't have to deal with your old-fashioned mama getting in the way of your vision." "What am I supposed to do?" His voice actually broke, and I saw tears starting in his eyes. "Mama, I have bills. Shanice and I, we have commitments. We were counting on taking what I built? On me dying or getting out of the way so you could cash in?" I felt my own eyes getting wet, but I blinked the tears back. "Baby, I gave you a job. I paid you good money for work you barely did. I loved you with everything I had, and you told me you were tired of me." The reporter was recording everything. The cameras were still flashing. Geneva Washington was watching with sad eyes, and Wanda was crying in her seat. I turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at my son one more time. "You wanted me to retire, Terrence. Congratulations. I'm retired." The story hit the news that same afternoon. Channel 7 ran it as their lead story. Local business owner donates $1 million company to charity instead of passing to son. By dinner time, it was on social media. By the next morning, it had gone viral. My phone started ringing off the hook. Some people called to congratulate me. Some called to tell me I was wrong. My sister Diane called from Birmingham, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Beatrice Louise Morrison, have you lost your natural mind? That's your son, your only child. My only child who told me he was tired of me. Diane. Baby, children say things they don't mean all the time. You don't punish them by giving away their inheritance. It wasn't his inheritance. It was mine to do with as I pleased. But $5 million, B? To strangers. To children who need it. And they're not strangers. Geneva, Washington has been running that foundation for 20 years. I know exactly where my money is going. Diane made a sound like a kettle whistling. Well, don't come crying to me when Terrence never speaks to you again. If that's his choice, I'll live with it. I hung up and sat down at my kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. My little house in West End felt too quiet. Usually by now Terrence would have stopped by with the grandbabies. Amara was 16 and Quincy was 13. And they'd come over every Tuesday after school for my fried chicken and mac and cheese. It was Tuesday. They weren't coming. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Amara. Grandma, Dad won't let us come over. He says you did something really mean to him. Is it true? My heart squeezed in my chest. I typed back. It's complicated, baby girl. But I love you and your brother more than anything in this world. That will never change. She didn't respond. Wednesday morning, I went to church for Bible study like I did every week. I'd been a member of Greater Hope Baptist for 47 years. I knew every person in that building, and they knew me. When I walked into the fellowship hall, the conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. Morning, I said, setting my Bible on the table. Wanda patted the seat next to her. Come on, Bee, sit down. But before I could move, Claudette Johnson stood up from across the room. Claudette had been friends with my late husband Claude's family. She was old money, always dressed nice, always had an opinion about everything. Beatrice Morrison, she said, her voice dripping with disapproval, I think you owe this church an explanation. Explanation for what, Claudette? For humiliating your son on television, for giving away his birthright. The whole city is talking about it. Do you know how that reflects on this church? On all of us? I felt heat rising in my face. With all due respect, what I do with my business is between me and God. That boy has been coming to this church since he was in diapers. We watched him grow up. And you've cut him off without a penny? What kind of mother does that? The kind of mother who got tired of being disrespected, I said quietly. Pastor Green walked into the room just then, and I'd never been so grateful to see someone in my life. He was a tall man, somewhere in his 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that somehow commanded respect. Good morning, everyone, he said. Let's open with prayer, shall we? After Bible study, Pastor Green asked me to stay behind. When everyone else had left, he sat down across from me and folded his hands on the table. How are you holding up, Sister Morrison? I've been better, Pastor. I imagine so. He was quiet for a moment. You know, I got a visit from Terrence yesterday. My stomach dropped. He came to see you? He did. He was very upset. Crying, actually. Said you'd given away everything he'd worked for, everything he'd been counting on. Did he tell you what he said to me? How he stormed into my office and told me he was tired of me? Pastor Green nodded slowly. He mentioned that. Said he was having a bad day, that Shanice had been pressuring him, that he didn't mean it the way it came out. And what do you think, Pastor? He leaned back in his chair. I think hurt people hurt people. I think your son has been feeling inadequate for a long time, living in the shadow of everything you built. I think his wife comes from a different kind of family, and she's been putting ideas in his head about what he deserves. He paused. But I also think what he said to you was cruel and disrespectful, and you had every right to be hurt by it. So you think I did the wrong thing? I didn't say that. Pastor Green smiled slightly. Sister Morrison, you've been one of the most generous members of this church for as long as I've been pastor here. You've helped countless families, given scholarships to young people, supported every ministry we have. If you decided to give your company to a children's charity, I trust you had your reasons. I felt tears coming and blinked them back. I just want him to understand, Pastor. I want him to know what it feels like to work for something instead of just expecting it to be handed to him. Perhaps he will. But I'll be honest with you. Right now, he's not in a place to understand anything except that he's hurt and angry. What should I do? Pray, give it time, and maybe. Keep your heart open to reconciliation, if and when he's ready. I nodded, but inside I was thinking, what if he's never ready? That afternoon, I got a certified letter delivered to my house. It was from a law firm I'd never heard of, Kincaid and Associates. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Mrs. Morrison, we represent Terrence Morrison in the matter of Morrison Beauty Supply Company. It has come to our attention that you have transferred ownership of said company under circumstances that may constitute undue influence, lack of mental capacity, and breach of verbal contract. Our client asserts that he was promised ownership of the company and has relied upon this promise to his detriment. We demand that you reverse this transfer immediately or face legal action. Please respond within 10 business days. I read it 3 times. Then called Harold Griffith. They're bluffing, Harold said after I read him the letter. You were under no obligation to give Terrence the company. There was no contract, verbal or otherwise, and any lawyer worth their salt knows that. So what do I do? Ignore it. Let them file suit if they want. They won't get anywhere. But I couldn't ignore it. That letter sat on my kitchen counter like a bomb waiting to go off. My son was suing me. My baby boy was taking me to court. Thursday evening, I was washing dishes when someone knocked on my door. I dried my hands and looked through the peephole. It was Amara. I opened the door so fast I nearly pulled it off the hinges. Baby girl! She stood on my porch looking nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid someone might see her. Can I come in, Grandma? Of course, of course. I pulled her inside and hugged her tight. She was tall now, almost as tall as me, with her hair in braids and her daddy's eyes. Where's your brother? At home. Dad's watching him like a hawk. I told him I was going to my friend Destiny's house. She pulled back and looked at me. Grandma, what's going on? Dad won't tell us anything except that you gave away his company and now we might lose our house. Lose your house? Baby, what are you talking about? Amara sat down on my couch and put her face in her hands. Mom and Dad have been fighting non-stop. Mom keeps crying and saying they're going to lose everything. Dad keeps saying it's your fault, that you betrayed him. They put a big deposit on this new house, and now they can't afford it. Dad says he might have to sell our house to cover the deposit they'll lose. I sat down next to her, my mind racing. Amara, honey, your daddy has a good job. He makes $85,000 a year. Had a good job, she corrected quietly. He quit on Monday, right after, after the announcement. He said he couldn't work for the foundation. Said it would be humiliating. I closed my eyes. Of course he quit. Of course he did. Grandma, I heard them talking last night. Dad's lawyer told him he doesn't have a case, but Dad says he's going to sue you anyway. He says he'll make you look so bad in court that you'll have to give him money just to make it stop. She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Why is this happening? Why is our family falling apart? I pulled her close and let her cry on my shoulder. Baby girl, sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who love them. Your daddy made some choices, and I made some choices, and now we're all dealing with the consequences. But you're his mother, and he's your son. Isn't there a way to fix this? I don't know, honey. I really don't know. She stayed for an hour, and we talked about school and her friends and everything except the lawsuit. When she left, I watched her walk down the street until she turned the corner, and then I sat on my porch and cried like I hadn't cried since Claude died. Friday morning, Wanda called me. "Girl, turn on Channel 7, right now." I grabbed my remote and turned on the TV. There was my son sitting in a TV studio across from that same reporter who'd been at my press conference. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for joining us today," the reporter said. "You've been at the center of a story that's captivated Atlanta this week. Tell us, in your own words, what happened." Terrence looked sad and sincere, like he'd been practicing in the mirror. "My mother and I had a disagreement, a private family disagreement. But instead of talking it through like adults, she decided to punish me in the most public, humiliating way possible. She gave away a company that I've dedicated my life to, a company I was promised would be mine one day." "Your mother says you told her you were tired of her. Is that true?" "I was frustrated. I'd been asking her to retire for years because I was worried about her health. She's 71 years old, working 12-hour days. As her son, I was concerned. Maybe I didn't express it perfectly. But my concern came from love." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "And now you're considering legal action?" "I don't want to sue my own mother. That's the last thing I want. But she's left me no choice. I have a family to support. I have children who are watching their college funds disappear. My wife and I are facing financial ruin because we made plans based on promises my mother made. What would you say to your mother if she were watching right now?" Terrence looked directly at the camera, and I swear he even managed to make his eyes water. "Mama, I love you. I'm sorry if I hurt you. But what you did was wrong, and you know it. Please, let's sit down and talk about this. Let's fix our family before it's too late." The TV interview ended, and I just sat there, staring at the screen. Wanda's voice came through the phone, which I'd forgotten I was holding. "B, you still there?" "He lied," I whispered. "He sat there on television and lied about everything." "I know, honey. I know. He made it sound like he was the victim, like I'm some cruel old woman who took away his birthright. People who know you know the truth. But what about people who don't know me? What about the hundreds of thousands of people who just watched that interview?" I hung up with Wanda and just sat there in my living room, feeling the walls close in. My phone started ringing again, reporters wanting my side of the story. I turned it off. That evening, I went to the main Morrison beauty supply location on North Avenue. I still had my key, even though the company wasn't mine anymore. I let myself in after closing time and walked through the aisles, running my fingers along the shelves I'd stocked for 43 years. I was standing in the hair products aisle when I heard the front door open. My heart jumped. Had someone followed me? Was it Terrence? "Mrs. Morrison?" a voice called out. "It's Geneva, Washington. I saw your car outside." I came around the corner, and there she was. Geneva, with her kind face and her gray locks tied back in a colorful scarf. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know I shouldn't be here. The company's not mine anymore." "Oh, hush with that. This will always be your store, Beatrice." She walked over and took my hands. "I saw the interview. I'm so sorry." "He made me look like a monster." "He made himself look like an entitled child," Geneva corrected firmly. "Anyone with sense could see right through that performance. But I understand why it hurts." We stood there for a moment in the quiet store. "I need to tell you something," Geneva said. "We've been getting calls, lots of calls. Some people want to boycott the stores because of what you did to your son. They're saying we shouldn't profit from family drama." My stomach sank. "Geneva, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt the foundation. If I'd known—" "Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "We've also been getting calls from people who want to support us. People who think what you did was brave. People who've dealt with entitled children themselves. People who want to donate, who want to volunteer, who want to help. For every one person calling to boycott, we've had 3 calling to support. I felt something loosen in my chest. Really? Really. And more than that, I talked to the employees today, all 93 of them. You know what they said? They said they're glad the company is going to keep running the way you built it. They said they were worried about what would happen if Terrence took over. She squeezed my hands. You did the right thing, Beatrice. Don't let anyone tell you different. I drove home that night feeling a little lighter. Maybe I wasn't the monster Terrence was making me out to be. Maybe some people understood. But when I pulled into my driveway, that feeling disappeared. Someone had spray painted across my garage door in big red letters. Greedy old woman. And sitting on my front porch, crying hysterically, was Shanice. How could you? She screamed when she saw me get out of my car. How could you do this to us? Do you know what you've done? We're going to lose everything, and for what? To prove some petty point? I walked toward my porch slowly. Shanice, you need to leave. Leave? Leave? You destroy my family and you want me to just leave? She stood up and I could see she'd been drinking. Terrence gave you his whole life. He worked for you for 20 years. He worked for me for 10 years and he barely showed up. Because you wouldn't let him do anything. You controlled everything, and now you've stolen his inheritance to get back at him for hurting your feelings. It wasn't his inheritance, Shanice. It was mine. She came down the porch steps, stumbling a little. You know what? I'm glad he said he was tired of you. I'm tired of you too. Tired of everything being about St. Beatrice and her precious stores. Tired of you acting like you're better than everyone. Tired of... That's enough, a voice said from behind me. I turned to see Wanda getting out of her car, along with 2 other women from church, Patrice and Delia. They must have seen Shanice's car and knew there was trouble. This is between me and my mother-in-law, Shanice said. Your mother-in-law asked you to leave? Wanda said firmly, walking up to stand beside me. So you need to go on and leave before we call the police. The police? Are you serious right now? As a heart attack, Patrice added. You're drunk, you're on her property, and you've made your point. Time to go. Shanice looked at all of us, then laughed bitterly. Fine. But this isn't over. Terrence is going to take you to court. And when he does, everyone is going to see what kind of person you really are. Everyone is going to know how you destroyed your own son. She got in her car and peeled out of my driveway so fast she nearly hit a mailbox. Wanda put her arm around me. Come on, honey. Let's get you inside. My garage, I said weakly. Someone painted on my garage. We'll take care of it tomorrow, Delia said. Right now you need to sit down. They took me inside and made me tea and sat with me until I stopped shaking. And as I sat there in my kitchen with these women who'd been my friends for decades, I realized something. I might have lost my son, but I hadn't lost everything. 2 days later, on Sunday morning, I got a certified letter. Terrence was suing me for $10 million. $10 million. My son was suing me for twice what the company was worth. I sat in Harold Griffith's office, staring at the lawsuit paperwork spread across his desk. Harold had reading glasses perched on his nose, and he kept shaking his head as he read through it. This is ambitious, he said finally. He's claiming emotional distress, defamation, breach of verbal contract, and loss of future earnings. He's also demanding that the transfer to the foundation be reversed, or if that's not possible, that you pay him the full value of the company plus damages. Can he do that? He can file whatever he wants. Winning is another story. Harold took off his glasses and looked at me. Beatrice, I'm going to be straight with you. This case is going to get ugly. Terrence's lawyers are going to dig into everything. Your finances, your health, your relationship with your son. They're going to try to paint you as a vindictive old woman who gave away the company out of spite. Let them try. I know the truth. The truth and what a jury believes are sometimes two different things. He leaned forward. I need you to understand what you're in for. This could take months, maybe even a year. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be exhausting. And it's going to be all over the news. What choice do I have? You could settle. Give him something. Not 10 million, but maybe 1 million or 2 to make this go away. I stood up from my chair. Harold, if I give him money now, what am I teaching him? That he can disrespect me, lie about me on television, and then sue me into submission? No, we fight. Harold smiled slightly. That's what I hoped you'd say. All right then. Let's get to work. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. The lawsuit became the talk of Atlanta. The news ran stories about it constantly. Social media was split down the middle. Half the people thought I was a hero standing up to an entitled son, and the other half thought I was a cruel mother who'd abandoned her child. People I'd known for years stopped speaking to me. At church, some folks would cross to the other side of the room when they saw me coming. Claudette Johnson started a prayer circle specifically for mothers who've lost their way. But others rallied around me. Wanda organized a support group of church members who'd bring me meals and sit with me when the loneliness got too heavy. Geneva Washington wrote a beautiful op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about why she believed I'd done the right thing, said former employees from Morrison Beauty Supply started a social media campaign called Should I Stand with Beatrice, sharing stories about how I'd helped them over the years. And then there were my grandchildren. Quincy started sneaking over on Saturday mornings when Terrence thought he was at basketball practice. He'd show up at my door looking nervous, and we'd make pancakes together like we used to, not talking about the lawsuit, just being grandmother and grandson. Dad says I'm betraying him by seeing you, Quincy told me one Saturday. But Grandma, you're not a bad person. I know you're not. Your daddy's not a bad person either, baby. He's just lost right now. Amara was bolder. She came over every Tuesday after school, openly, and when Terrence confronted her about it, she told him flat out, "She's my grandmother. You can't make me choose." Their visits were the only thing that kept me going during those dark months. The preliminary hearings were brutal. Terrence's lawyer was a sharp-dressed woman named Victoria Ellis, who seemed determined to make me look like an unstable old woman who'd given away a company out of senile confusion. "Mrs. Morrison," she said during one deposition, "isn't it true that you've been experiencing memory problems?" "No." "You don't sometimes forget where you put your keys? Forget appointments?" "I'm 71 years old. Sometimes I forget where I put my keys. That doesn't make me senile." "What about your blood pressure medication? You take that for a serious condition, don't you?" Harold objected, but I could see where this was going. They were going to try to prove I wasn't in my right mind when I donated the company. During another hearing, Victoria played a recording. It took me a moment to realize it was from that Monday morning in my office when Terrence had confronted me. "I'm tired of you, Mama." His voice came through the speaker. I hadn't known he'd recorded it, but he had, and now they were using it to show that I'd made a rash decision based on hurt feelings. "Mrs. Morrison," Victoria said, "you heard your son say those words, and immediately decided to give away a $5 million company. Doesn't that seem like an extreme reaction?" "I didn't decide immediately. I spent a week thinking about it, praying about it, and consulting with advisors." "But you admit those words hurt you?" "Of course they hurt me. I'm human." "And in that hurt, you decided to punish your son by—" "I didn't punish him," I interrupted. "I freed both of us. He was tired of me? Well, I was tired of watching him take for granted everything I'd built. I was tired of him showing up 3 days a week and complaining that I wouldn't hand him the keys to a kingdom he hadn't earned. So I did what I had every legal right to do. I gave my company to people who would appreciate it." Victoria smiled like I'd just proven her point. "So you admit this was an emotional decision?" "I admit it was my decision. Mine to make." The court of public opinion was another battlefield entirely. Terrence did more TV interviews, each one more tearful than the last. He talked about his children's college funds, about the house they were going to lose, about how I'd cut him off without warning. What he didn't mention was that I'd been paying him $85,000 a year for minimal work. What he didn't mention was that he'd quit his job voluntarily. What he didn't mention was that he'd put a deposit on a house worth 3 times what he could afford because he was counting on inheriting millions. But I didn't do interviews. Harold advised against it. "Let him talk," Harold said. "Let him show his hand. We'll tell our story in court." 4 months after the lawsuit was filed, we finally went to trial. The courtroom was packed. News cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters filled the gallery. I sat at the defendant's table in a simple navy dress, my hands folded in my lap, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. Terrence sat across the aisle with Shanice beside him. He wouldn't look at me. The trial lasted a week. Victoria Ellis brought in expert witnesses who testified about verbal contracts and family businesses. She brought in friends of Terrence who said I'd always promised him the company. She even brought in a psychiatrist who suggested I might have been experiencing an episode of late-life emotional dysregulation when I made the donation. Harold Griffith was methodical and thorough. He brought in my accountant who showed that Terrence had been paid generously for years. He brought in employees who testified that Terrence rarely showed up and was generally incompetent when he did. He brought in my doctor who confirmed I was in perfect mental health. And he brought in Geneva, Washington, who explained exactly what the foundation was doing with Morrison Beauty Supply and how many children would benefit. But the most powerful moment came when Harold called me to the stand. "Mrs. Morrison," Harold said, "can you tell the court about the day your son came to your office?" I took a deep breath and told the story. All of it. How Terrence had stormed in without knocking. How he'd slammed his hand on my desk. How he'd told me he was tired of me, tired of waiting, tired of everything. "And how did that make you feel?" Harold asked. "Like I'd failed as a mother." My voice cracked and I had to pause. I raised that boy by myself after his father died. I worked 3 jobs so he could have a better life than I had. I sent him to college. I gave him a job when he needed one. I loved him with everything I had. And he stood in my office and told me he was tired of me. What did you do after he left? I prayed. I talked to my pastor. I thought about what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. And I realized that giving my company to my son wouldn't help him. It would just enable him to continue taking things for granted. But giving it to children who needed opportunities? That felt right. That felt like something my late husband would have wanted. That felt like the right way to honor everything I'd built. Victoria Ellis cross-examined me hard, trying to trip me up, trying to make me angry. But I'd been through too much in my 71 years to be rattled by a lawyer in a courtroom. When both sides had presented their cases, the judge, a black woman in her 60s named Judge Simmons, wait, no, can't use Simmons, Judge Hamilton, Judge Regina Hamilton called for closing arguments. Victoria Ellis went first, painting me as a bitter old woman who'd weaponized her wealth to hurt her son. Then Harold stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is not complicated. Mrs. Morrison built a company with her own hands over 43 years. It was hers, not her son's. Hers. She had every legal right to do with it as she pleased. The plaintiff wants you to believe that children are entitled to their parents' wealth simply by virtue of being born. But that's not how the law works. That's not how life works." He walked over to where I was sitting. "Mrs. Morrison worked 3 jobs after her husband died. She built a successful business while raising a son alone. She employed 93 people. She supported her community. She gave scholarships and donated to churches and helped countless families. And when her son, a grown man of 42 years, told her he was tired of her and demanded she hand over her life's work, she made a choice. She chose to give her company to children who would appreciate opportunities. She chose dignity over obligation. And she chose to teach her son a lesson about respect and gratitude, even if that lesson was painful. Harold turned to the judge. The plaintiff claims emotional distress. But who really suffered here? A man who lost something he never owned? Or a mother who heard her only child say he was tired of her? The plaintiff claims breach of contract, but there was no contract. There were only the entitled expectations of a son who never learned the value of hard work. Your Honor, we ask that you dismiss this lawsuit with prejudice and award Mrs. Morrison her legal fees. Thank you. Judge Hamilton took 2 days to make her decision. When we returned to the courtroom, I could barely breathe. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony carefully, Judge Hamilton said, and I find that the plaintiff has failed to prove any of his claims. Mrs. Morrison was under no legal obligation to give her company to her son. There was no contract, verbal or otherwise, that would have required such a transfer. The donation to the Bright Futures Children's Foundation was made freely, with sound mind, and with proper legal documentation. I felt Wanda grab my hand. Furthermore, Judge Hamilton continued, I find the plaintiff's claims of emotional distress to be without merit. While family disputes are painful, they do not rise to the level of legal damages. The plaintiff's own actions and words precipitated this situation, and he cannot now claim injury from the natural consequences of his behavior. She looked directly at Terrence. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're disappointed, but your mother built something remarkable, and she had every right to decide what to do with it. Perhaps instead of suing her, you should have thanked her for the opportunities she gave you. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. Morrison is awarded legal fees in the amount of $47,000. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and the courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Wanda hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. Harold was smiling wider than I'd ever seen. And Terrence? He sat there with his head in his hands while Shanice stormed out of the courtroom. I walked over to where my son was sitting. His lawyer had already left. He was alone. Terrence, I said quietly. He looked up at me with red eyes. Are you happy now, Mama? Did you get what you wanted? What I wanted was for you to respect me. What I wanted was for you to appreciate the sacrifices I made. What I wanted was for you to be the man I raised you to be. I lost everything. No, baby. You lost things you never had. The company was never yours. The house you couldn't afford was never yours. The easy life you thought you were entitled to was never yours. I sat down next to him. But you haven't lost everything. Your children still love you. And I still love you, even after all this. I can't believe that. Not after what you did. What I did was teach you a lesson your father would have taught you if he'd lived. Nothing worth having comes easy. Nothing valuable is just handed to you. You work for it. You earn it. You appreciate it. He wiped his eyes. So what now? Now you figure out who you want to be. You can spend the rest of your life being bitter about what you think you deserved, or you can build something of your own, something you can be proud of. I stood up. The choice is yours, son. It's always been yours. I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. 3 months later, I was sitting on my front porch on a warm Saturday morning when a car pulled up. Terrence got out, followed by Amara and Quincy. Grandma! Quincy ran up and hugged me. Amara was right behind him. We brought you something. Terrence walked up slowly, holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. I made your recipe, he said quietly. The lemon pound cake. I know it's not as good as yours, but... I took the plate and peeked under the foil. The cake was a little lopsided, a little overcooked on the edges. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Come inside, I said. I'll make coffee. We sat in my kitchen, and it was awkward at first, but slowly we started talking. Really talking. Terrence told me he'd gotten a job as a sales manager at a technology company. It didn't pay as much as he'd been making at Morrison Beauty Supply, but he was actually working for it. He and Shanice had sold their house and moved to a smaller place. They were learning to live within their means. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said finally. "For everything I said, for how I treated you, for the lawsuit. I was wrong. I know you were." "Can you forgive me?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Baby, I forgave you the day it happened. I was just waiting for you to forgive yourself." We didn't fix everything that day. Some wounds take time to heal, but it was a start. A year later, I stood in the main Morrison Beauty Supply location, now fully run by the Bright Futures Foundation. They'd kept all the original employees and hired 15 more. They'd started a scholarship program that was sending 25 kids to college. They'd opened a mentorship program where business owners could teach young people about entrepreneurship. Geneva gave me a tour, showing me all the changes they'd made while keeping the heart of what I'd built. "You did good, Beatrice," she said. "Real good." I looked around at the store I'd opened 43 years ago with $800 and a prayer. It wasn't mine anymore, but it was thriving. It was helping people. It was making a difference, and that was better than any inheritance I could have left. That evening, I had dinner at my house with Terrence, Shanice, Amara, and Quincy. We ate fried chicken and mac and cheese, and we laughed, and for the first time in over a year, we felt like a family again. After they left, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over my neighborhood. My phone buzzed with a text from Wanda. "Proud of you, girl." I smiled and typed back, "Proud of me too." I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lawsuit, the pain, the healing. And I realized something important. I'd spent 43 years building a business, but in the end, I'd built something more valuable than that. I'd built a legacy of standing up for myself, of teaching hard lessons with love, of knowing my worth and refusing to let anyone, even my own son, make me forget it. The company was gone, but I was still here, still strong, still standing, still free. And that, I thought as I rocked in my chair and watched the stars come out, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.